Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. James, good morning to you.
Good morning, Andrew. How you doing?
I'm good. My little toe, not so much. But the rest of me, fine.
What's happened to your toe?
Well, I was trying to navigate my way through a doorway in my bare feet. Sure. Archer.
Trying to walk through a doorway.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
I actually did try and basically kick the door jamb off the outside of the door. Archer was lying there. I didn't want to disturb him, so I sort of swung my foot over him and with my little toe absolutely booted the door jamb in the same way that Bukayo Saka booted that goal in for England, with the same kind of precision and power that he generated on that football. I generated with my little toe on the door jamb, and it's very, very painful. But the rest of me, thankfully, is all right. How about you?
I'm okay, thanks, man. I've. Do you know what? I've passed uneventfully through all doorways in the last week or so.
I thought you were going to say I passed a very large kidney stone last night, so I'm feeling pretty good today.
No drama on that front. But sorry to hear about your little toe. They are very vulnerable, those little toes. They're on the outside, on the exterior of the body, and they're taking the brunt of some of these collisions.
Yeah. They're kind of crap as well when you look at them.
Yeah.
I don't pay too much attention to my toes or anything like that. You know, I don't spend a lot of time looking at my feet, really. But when you hurt your little toe, you look down at it and think that is really a grotesque part of the human body.
It feels like if evolution is ongoing, that should be one of the first things to go.
Replaced with something better. I don't know what, but something that looks...
Yeah, a can opener or just something we've got a use for.
Yeah, like a Swiss Army knife type thing, yeah.
Yeah, I'd get rid of it. So actually, maybe you're just ahead of the curve, Andrew.
Maybe so. I am evolution in progress. Maybe
Exactly.
That's what it is. Yeah.
But yes, Bukayo Saka, I mean, he's the man of the weekend, isn't he?
He certainly is. And it's it's fantastic to see him, how do I put this? Obviously deliver for England. You know, the hopes of the nation, not necessarily resting entirely on his shoulders, but when England needed a goal, he was there. He popped up with the quality that England needed, that they hadn't really shown in the game up until that point. You know, when Switzerland spoke to Dan from HLTCO about this on our Patreon pod yesterday, but when Switzerland went 1-0 up in the 75th minute, based on what we'd seen previously, it was a bit like, oh, well, that's pretty much curtains for England here.
Yeah.
But Saka, as we know very, very well, as Arsenal fans, has the ability to produce something. Is he maybe the most something out of nothing player that we have in the squad at this moment in time? Like, if, you know, we've often talked about individualists and, you know, someone like Alexis Sanchez, who could get you a goal when you didn't really look like getting one. Is he maybe the most like that in this current Arsenal squad?
I think he probably is. I mean, Gabriel Jesus on a good day, I think, can pull a rabbit out of a hat. But then he's as likely to pull the rabbit out of the hat and then sort of boot it 8 yards over the bar. So I think I'd probably come round and say Saka, same as you. I mean, listen, he completely saved England's bacon at the weekend, and it was a brilliant goal. Not unlike his goal against Manchester United, not last season, but the season before. I've seen some good sort of cut together videos on social media of the similarities between those two.
I couldn't remember when I was writing the blog yesterday, I couldn't remember if it was last season or the season before.
Yeah.
But it feels like a familiar goal from Bukayo Saka. Like we've seen that goal quite a few times during his time at Arsenal.
Yeah, cutting in onto his left. I mean, it was interesting because a lot of the speculation before the game had been that he was going to play as a left wing back. England obviously changed to a back three, and the expectation was that one of Kieran Trippier or Trent Alexander-Arnold would play as the right wing back and Saka as the left to introduce a bit more balance. But obviously Saka started as a right wing back, which is a role we've seen him finish quite a lot of games in for Arsenal. I feel like there have been a few occasions where we've been chasing it and he's been a kind of nominal right wing back. But much like on those occasions, he was much more forward-thinking than defensive-minded. I think it was wing-back in name, but winger really in the way that he played.
I mean, he was England's best player on the day by some distance, I think. I think Declan Rice had a decent game in the way that he does without being overly spectacular. I think throughout the tournament he's been pretty consistent in what he's done. And, the balance of the England team I don't think is sufficient to get the best out of some of the players that England have, and I think he might be one of those players who is impacted by the balance. The discussion is often about the attacking end product, and Harry Kane playing as a DM kind of gets in the way of Declan Rice, I think. But he was good. But
he's had 3 different partners as well in central midfield. He started with Alexander-Arnold. He had Conor Gallagher. Now he's got Kobe Mainoo.
But did you see the graphic? I think Scott Willis posted it, like the average position map for the England team.
I haven't. Right. Why? Is Harry Kane somewhere near
Harry Kane is
penalty area?
Literally on the halfway line. That was his average position. And Declan Rice was playing further forward, more averaging a position further forward than Harry Kane. So that tells you plenty about Declan Rice, but certainly more about Harry Kane. But going back to Saka, he was the most positive player in the first half for England, even if England didn't do a great deal in those first 45 minutes. And then the goal, which rescued England, because I know Southgate had made some changes at that point, didn't he? He made changes immediately after the Swiss goal. But before that, he didn't seem too inclined to change anything. He looked relatively content to let the game sort of go towards a 0-0 and extra time and maybe towards penalties.
He did, yeah. I mean, I think Saka saved not only England, but Gareth Southgate a little bit there as well, because, it's easy for a manager to say, well, look, I made changes and we scored, but I'm not sure how much those changes impacted on the fact that we scored. It was an individual piece of brilliance, much like in the last round where England were bailed out by a Jude Bellingham overhead kick. I mean, I suppose one thing you would say is that's something this squad has, which England maybe haven't had for a couple of generations, which is extraordinary individual talent that can be decisive in tournament football. It was Bellingham last round, it was Saka this, and who knows, maybe Phil Foden or somebody else might step up in the semi-final on Wednesday night. I did think that was something which helped Saka, actually. I spoke last week about how much he misses Ben White and Martin Odegaard and having quality players near him. And as much as England's system didn't, I think, greatly improve their performance, they did at least get Phil Foden into areas close to Bukayo Saka, and there was a little bit of combination play. I think that helped him. I think that was a positive step. But I was surprised to see how... I suppose it's sort of result-based analysis, isn't it? But I felt like watching television, certainly here in England, everyone was saying, wow, they were so much better. The changes really worked. Whereas I think England were a Bukayo Saka wonder goal away from another incredibly disappointing performance and an exit. I agree.
I was watching BBC and I was at halftime, I was like, are they watching a different game?
Yeah.
Are they really?
Felt like someone had a word with them, honestly. Like it almost felt, because obviously there's been a lot of criticism from the press and the players have bit back a bit.
Yeah.
And I felt like I didn't buy it, like how positive they were being.
No, I was like, what? Really? There were some positive aspects to elements of the England performance, but the overall performance, and I think even over the course of the 120 minutes was... Like, it wasn't a brilliant performance by any means, and certainly in extra time, if any team was going to win it, it looked like Switzerland were the ones that might win it with the chances that they created. I saw Micah Richards on BBC afterwards saying, England were brilliant today. And I was like, the goal was brilliant. The penalties were brilliant.
Yeah.
But that's it. Like, the overall performance was not, and like, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it doesn't matter to many England fans. England are into the semi-final, and that's the main thing. But, to go through a tournament and produce a series of underwhelming performances with that kind of talent, I think it has to be there as part of the discussion. You can be happy and positive, obviously, about the fact that England are in the semi-final, but I don't think it does anyone any favours to say that England were brilliant in this game, or that I don't even think there was a massive improvement on what we saw in those previous performances. They were like barely functional.
Yeah, no, you're not going to get any argument from me on that. Like I was really underwhelmed, but at the same time they are through, and I have had this nagging feeling for about a week or so now that England are going to sail through this competition without playing well, and the draw has certainly helped them in that regard. I mean, I don't think it will be an easy task against the Netherlands on Wednesday. They have strung some football together. They have scored some goals from open play and things like that. But yeah, it's a really curious one. I was sort of very intrigued by the reaction. I guess ultimately people are sort of, their position is determined by results, right? England being in the semi-final, that's a good thing. So we're going to bang all the drums and say that it's great. But yeah, the football's not been good. I don't think anyone in their right mind could really make an argument for that.
Let's talk about the penalties then, because obviously there's a history there for Bukayo Saka. Yeah. After what happened in the Euro 2020 final, which took place obviously in 2021 because of everything that had gone on at that time. I just want to play his little quote afterwards. This is what he said to the media after the game.
I'm not going to be focusing on the past, that's done. I can only focus on now and taking the penalty. Of course, I know there's a lot of nervous people watching, my family included in the crowd, but, I kept my cool and I scored.
It's nice for him to include me in his family as one of the nervous people watching. Thanks, Bukayo. I consider you family too.
It's so matter of fact, isn't it? I just kept my cool and scored. But it's impossible to think that when he was there, as focused as he was on the present and what he had to do and the task in front of him, that somewhere in the back of his mind, what happened in that or after that penalty, well, I guess with that penalty against Italy and then the reaction to it and the horrendous racist abuse that he and others were subjected to, could not have been completely locked away. It must have been in the back of his mind. So I think the penalties that England took, all 5, were incredibly impressive. I think the pressure on all of them, Cole Palmer, Jude Bellingham, Ivan Toney, even if he is clearly some kind of penalty-taking sociopath. Yeah. Trent Alexander-Arnold, obviously, with that responsibility to score the penalty that put England through. He knew that, and he also knew that if he missed, it opened up the door for Switzerland again. So they all had this pressure on them to produce. But for Saka, it was more. I think there was more for him to deal with because of what had happened previously. And I think around the world, Arsenal fans, whether they're England supporters or not, right, would have been absolutely, to a man or woman, willing Bukayo Saka to score that penalty. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think when he did, in the England players' sort of friends and family section in the stadium, there were even a few tears shed because people knew what it meant to him, and you could see it on his face. Yeah. Like, we're used to seeing Bukayo Saka smile. I'm not sure we're used to seeing him smile quite as broadly as that. He was really delighted. And I saw another quote from him in his press conference where he said, "You can fail once, but you have a choice whether you put yourself in that position again." And I thought, what a brilliant example that is to any young person watching. Like, everyone's going to fail at times in life. Maybe not in such a public and painful way as Bukayo Saka did in 2021. But it's about, are you willing to put yourself in that position again? Are you willing to take responsibility on again? And he's done it time after time after time. Yes, it still makes me feel sick in my stomach, but I was delighted for him. This might be sort of blasphemous, but I actually think Saka's penalty was probably the least well struck of the 5. I thought it was a bit of a scuff, to be honest with you. But it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter.
The one thing I would say about that is I know what you mean about the actual strike of the ball compared to the other penalties.
Yeah.
What I would say, though, is that his penalty, even if the goalkeeper had gone the right way, was completely unsavable. There was no way he was going to get there.
Yeah,
even if he'd gone that way.
Went the wrong way, right? So in a way,
yeah,
he'd already scored in a sense. He'd won the psychological battle, but I think he can take a cleaner penalty than that. But maybe he will in the semi-final.
Maybe he will. Yeah.
What about Ivan Toney? By the way, like, what is happening there?
I don't know that I've ever seen anything quite like that before.
Just staring the guy down,
and the one step, like it's like a five-a-side thing. I don't know if you play this in five-a-side, but if you have a penalty in five-a-side, it's like one step, right?
Yeah.
None of this running and booting the ball as we might have seen in some five-a-side tournaments in the past, James. But
of course,
one step, staring directly at the goalkeeper. Goalkeeper went the right way and still couldn't get fucking near it. It's an amazing penalty.
And just not looking at the ball at any point. I mean, I suppose it's just pure repetition.
Yeah,
you know, like
practice. Yeah,
practice. But it is an extraordinary sight just seeing his eyes locked on the goalkeeper while he calmly kicks the ball in the bottom corner. But yeah, I forget which journalist said it, but England have become a team who progress despite not playing very well. They win penalty shootouts. I think it was Jan Fjortoft actually who said it. They've kind of become Germany. It's very strange.
Yeah, considering England's history with penalty shootouts, it's quite the turnaround. But you know, it looked to me, and I could be wrong, and I don't know one way or the other, but it does look to me as if there has been attention paid to the penalties. I mean, I think in Saka, in Cole Palmer, certainly took a lot of penalties last season and scored a lot of penalties last season. And Ivan Toney, who takes a lot of penalties and scores a lot of penalties as well. They've got three very, very good penalty takers, generally speaking, right? So they've done the job for their clubs. And they, of course, were on the pitch. I think the introduction of Trent Alexander-Arnold as a sub in extra time was to make sure he was on the pitch to take a penalty as much as anything. But it looks as if England have paid attention to this, that they know maybe that this is an area of strength in a very tight tournament in which they can't really score too many goals from open play. So this is something that they're trying to maximize every possible every aspect of the game that they can to help them go through,
Absolutely. We saw Jordan Pickford had done his homework. Did you see his water bottle?
I did, yeah.
With
it says on the side of it, tilt to drink.
Yeah, and then on the other side, it's got all the Swiss penalty takers and which way to dive. Basically, his whole life is like that. The goalkeeper coach provides him with instructions for everything. His gloves say left and right and all things like that. But apparently, Jack Pitt-Brooke was telling me that England had a really intricate system for penalties where every taker. So they had 11 players on the sidelines waiting, 10 in fact, right? The goalkeepers in the penalty area. Each one of the 5 takers had an allocated penalty buddy, essentially, who would have a little word with them before they went up, and when they came back to the group, would be the first player who would go out and give them a hug or presumably console them had they missed. So I guess the theory being it allows the other takers to focus entirely on their penalty, what they're going to do, not get involved. I've not seen anything quite like that before. So England obviously have put a lot of thought. I think Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank has been doing some work with the penalty takers as well. Weirdly enough, he's part of Gareth Southgate's coaching staff. So yeah, they had put a lot of thought into it, and it paid dividends. So yeah, on to Dortmund now and the Netherlands.
The Netherlands, who beat Turkey. But yeah, what a brilliant day for Bukayo Saka, and good to see him get the recognition that he deserves at international level for what he does for England. I think he's a really consistent performer.
Back pages for all the right reasons, some front pages as well. Yeah. And for us as Arsenal fans, it was a nice little moment, the goal, because I believe it was a Declan Rice pass, a Bukayo Saka shot, and a celebration with Aaron Ramsdale. So
yeah, lovely. Actually, there was a little comment/question on the Discord from Mary Had a Little Ramsdale, who said, do you think the created at Arsenal nature of Saka's goal on Saturday showed the benefit of having club teammates playing together for international teams? At Arsenal, we frequently see Ben White making runs to take players away to create space for Saka, but Walker doesn't do that for him. Walker doesn't do anything except what he feels like for himself, as far as I can see. Anyway, it felt like Rice executed an Arsenal move by giving the ball to Saka, then making the run into the box as if looking for the return pass to take two players away and create the space for Saka to step into and take the shot.
Totally agree. Yeah, if you watch the goal back, it feels like watching Arsenal, and it feels like there's an understanding between Rice and Saka of what needs to be done. And I think that's really important. And I think, part of England's problem has been trying to get fluidity between players who operate for different teams. By the way, we spoke about the penalties. Obviously, one guy who didn't take was England's captain, Harry Kane. I just thought I should mention quickly his exit from the game, which was particularly hilarious. Manuel Akanji sort of skittling him into Gareth Southgate, and he never even got back on the field.
That was very funny, I have to say. With all due respect to any England fans who are listening to this, I did enjoy Harry Kane getting kind of bumped in that way, given the nature of some of the fouls that we've seen him commit over the years, particularly while wearing an England-adjacent coloured shirt, shall we say, for that lot down the road. Those little fouls where he, bumps into a player when they're in the air and slightly off balance. It was, maybe a little bit of justice to see a bit given back to him. Let me ask you this, because we actually had a question and you brought him up. I wasn't going to mention him, but you brought him up. But we did have a question. I'm wondering if it was on the... it was on Twitter. It comes from Sean Nielsen, who's at Zallo Gunner. He says, congratulations, you are now Gareth Southgate. You now control his limbs, eyes and brain and so on. Who starts at number 9 up front for England against the Netherlands and why? So you're Gareth Southgate. I'm not going to be Gareth Southgate. I refuse to be Gareth Southgate, but you can be Gareth Southgate for the purposes of this question. Who starts for England at number 9 or up front against the Netherlands?
I'm Gareth Southgate. Wow, what a thought. Well, if I'm Gareth Southgate, it's Harry Kane, isn't it? I mean, that's the problem.
Okay, you're not Gareth Southgate.
Okay, I'm not Gareth Southgate.
But now you have the responsibilities of... You are a doppelganger. They've done the whole switcheroo. It's like that movie Face Off,
Okay. So I've got Gareth Southgate's face.
You've got Gareth Southgate's face.
But I'm not Gareth Southgate.
You're not Gareth Southgate. Everyone thinks you're Gareth Southgate, but you're not actually Gareth Southgate.
Wow, what a curse this is. I guess Ollie Watkins then.
Right. Okay, yeah, that's what I would...
Ivan Toney's no-look penalty has, thrown his name into contention. I enjoyed it that much. It made me wonder about all the other things he might be able to do without looking. But
I saw your tweet, actually.
Yeah. But I think Ollie Watkins is the better all-round striker. What about if you? I know obviously you're not and never will be Gareth Southgate, nor will be confused for him. But who would you pick?
I would also pick Ollie Watkins. I think he would give that position a kind of energy and movement that England and other players in that England team could really benefit from. I think Kane has been really, really bad. And leaving all the Tottenham stuff aside, objectively analysing his performances, he has been shit.
Yeah, and he doesn't even look fit. That's the thing. It's like, he had I think a back injury towards the end of the season, missed quite a few games, and it just looks to me like he's not over that.
I think there are, I've seen people make comparisons with the level of performance that we saw from Ronaldo for Portugal, and I don't think, despite some differences, I don't think those are too... I don't think there's anything wrong with those comparisons, because I think he has been basically a net negative for England, Harry Kane. Similarly with Ronaldo for Portugal, that the team has suffered because of their presence in it, despite, you know, their history. I guess that's why they're in the team. It's reputation. It's what they've done in the past. It's certainly not what they've been doing in the present since this tournament started. Yeah. For Harry Kane to keep his place after dropping 2 out of 10 performances in every single game, despite the fact he did score in one of them, he was still crap. You know, keeping your place while Watkins and Tony are sitting on the bench. Like, I was watching that on Saturday. I think I tweeted it. Like, Watkins and Tony must be absolutely fuming, sitting there watching that guy bumble around, doing nothing, getting in the way of everybody, and they're not getting a chance off the bench.
Yeah. Like,
would he have put Tony on if Harry Kane hadn't been bumped off the pitch by Akanji?
I honestly don't know. And didn't Southgate say, I think it was after the previous round, he said Ivan Toney was
disgusted with him,
yeah, for putting on for the last 3 minutes of stoppage time.
Yeah.
And you can understand that. Yeah, it's just really strange one. I was thinking about this during the game quite a lot, and I feel like Southgate, he's kind of become a victim of his own management style in some respects, because the foundations he built with England were all about, you know, his relationships with the players and the atmosphere created among the squad, and, you know, basing the team around certain core individuals. And Kane was obviously one of those guys, but I think carrying that as far as he has and into this tournament has really cost him. I think, you know, evidently Kane is not what he was, and yeah, I'm totally with you. I you know, from the first game, his performances have been problematic.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens on Wednesday when England face the Netherlands. The other semi-final, of course, is France versus Spain. Kai Havertz, Germany, went out to Spain on, was it Saturday? No, it was Friday. I think that game played. A very Kai Havertz performance, in that I thought he was, generally speaking, really involved, really impactful. I think he showed a lot of quality in most aspects of his game, but just the final bit, the end product, the finish wasn't quite there for him on the day. And, you know, it felt a very Kai Havertz sort of performance. I enjoyed lots of it, but I guess if I was a Germany fan, I would be somewhat frustrated that certain moments didn't have a bit more conviction, something we've maybe talked about a bit when it comes to Kai.
Listen, I don't think any of the chances he had were sort of gilt-edged, has to score kind of chances, but they were openings, weren't they? And they were kind of the openings in the game. He had one from a header from the right-hand side. It was kind of too close to the goalkeeper. Another one where he brought the ball down, but didn't get a great strike away. There was another chance in the second half. I forget exactly how it was
the really poor goal kick.
Oh yeah,
which I think it is basically it's sort of summed up his performance in that he was alert, he was on his toes, he was aware of what was going on, he was strong, he was quick, he got to the ball, he made the right decision to try and put it over the goalkeeper because he was so far out of his goal, but just didn't find the finish. Like, everything but the finish was great, but without the finish, does it really matter?
Well, possibly not. You know, I don't think he's ever going to change at this point. I think this is probably who he is, and that seems to be a forward who makes teams play better and play well, who makes systems work, who works incredibly hard, who does everything you'd want athletically and sort of organisationally from your striker, but isn't a cold-blooded killer in front of goal. And I just don't really see that changing at this point in time. Do I think it matters enough? I mean, I think it makes him very hard to upgrade upon. That's the thing. I think it means that only a select few strikers in world football really are a better bet than him. And because I think it's a non-negotiable for Arteta that any centre forward in his team does all that other stuff. I think if you find a guy who can do all that other stuff and is a better finisher as well, then obviously you do it. But it's not easy to name those people.
I know what you mean. I was a bit of a throwaway remark about does it matter, but
yeah,
it mattered obviously for Germany on the day because they fell victim to a late goal from Mikel Merino.
Another player who's been linked with Arsenal.
A Mikel from the Basque region, handsome, dark-haired midfielder. I mean, feels like that's the kind of thing we should do.
Yeah. I mean, 28 is I think we said last week, maybe the thing that makes you think, not sure we would do that. Not previously been a big part of our recruitment strategy, although the likes of Jorginho and Trossard have obviously come in a bit later. But that was a lovely goal. Great ball, good header, right at the death as well. No answer to it. And Spain, I think you'd probably say Spain are the favourites right now.
Yeah, I think so. Particularly as France, like England, have been pretty underwhelming. Then again, at the back, our boy, William Saliba, has been outstanding. Absolutely brilliant throughout this tournament. Really, really consistent. I think France, as maybe we talked about last week, their strength has been in defence rather than going forward, and there might be reasons for that. Mbappe with his injury obviously is having a fairly significant impact on him. If what Gary Lineker was saying on the BBC was true about him struggling to sleep and having a lot of pain with that injury, so playing in a mask with that injury is not ideal. And obviously then the fact that France have a lot of kind of all right but not brilliant options in attack, you just can't be sure what you're going to get from any of those players. There's the lack of if we talk about a lack of conviction from someone like Kai Havertz, there's been plenty of that from the French attackers, the likes of Thuram and Kolo Muani, etc., where they're fine but not brilliant. So France have lent into their defensive strength, and Saliba, I think, has been a really, really big part of that.
Yeah, I mean, they've conceded one goal, I think, in the tournament, a penalty kick.
They only scored one, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they have been really underwhelming as well. Maybe we're not quite as critical of them as we are as of England because, it's not quite the same microscope, but I've been very disappointed in what France have produced, and yet there they are at the latter stages of the competition, as you would expect them to be. And it wouldn't be a shock. I say Spain are the favourites, but it wouldn't be a shock if they went and beat them and went on to the final. They are just very resilient, and in William Saliba, they've got a brilliant foundation for their team. I think their defence in general actually is really, really solid, and when you've got N'Golo Kante patrolling in front of them, that doesn't hurt either. It's sort of incredible. At the start of this tournament, I sort of didn't realise N'Golo Kante was going to be quite such an important part of the France team. I think because he's not playing in European football anymore and he's 33, I sort of assumed, he's past his best and we won't see that much of him, but he's arguably been their best player.
A potential France-England final.
Yes, which, we saw that game, was it in the World Cup or in the Euros? I don't know.
Your memory of this will be better than mine, so...
Well, England were knocked out by France in a recent international tournament in extra time. Harry Kane missed a penalty.
Well, it must have been the World Cup then, because England got to the final of the last Euros. So.
You're right. It must have been the World Cup.
Yeah.
And I think Bukayo Saka had a great game that night as well. Won a penalty. And then I seem to remember he got substituted off and it all went wrong. So
that's what you get. That's what you get when you take fucking Bukayo Saka off.
So, what do you reckon now? 2 semi-finals. You think Spain?
I think I would have Spain as favourites, and I think I would have England as favourites for their game. The Netherlands maybe have just begun to show a little bit in this tournament, but I don't think man for man they have the kind of quality that England have, and the sort of player like Saka, for example, who can produce something out of nothing or produce a moment of high quality. Cody Gakpo has obviously scored plenty of goals, despite the fact commentators around the world, including Danny Murphy on the BBC, and I think it's Kenny Cunningham on RTE here, who keep calling him Cody Gapco. And it's driving me fucking crazy. Like, whatever about stumbling over it once. Like, does nobody have a quick word in the ear, you know?
It's like Carzola.
Yeah, exactly.
Get a lot of Carzola.
A lot of Carzolas, yeah. So it's a bit like that. But I would have England as favourites. I don't know that it's going to be a classic. But, yeah. I would... If I had to put money on it, I'd put it on a Spain-England final.
Wow. That'd be a big one. That'd be a big one.
That'd be a big one, all right.
Yeah, I mean, I slightly worry about the Netherlands in that, you know, they score goals and things like that. And England have just not produced yet. And I kind of keep thinking that just even on sort of the basis of odds, you know, like a game of roulette, eventually England will put something together or spring into life somehow. And they haven't done that at any stage in the tournament. So my worry is when they come up against somebody, you know, who do have some match winners in their team, you know, whether it's Gakpo or whether it's Memphis Depay or, you know, someone who could produce a moment.
It's not going to be him.
He's busy fiddling with his headband. But, I don't know. Couldn't call that one. Couldn't call either of them, actually. I think that is the thing about the Euros. It does produce these quite close ties between the big nations at the end, and it really does feel like it could go either way. I mean, a bit like Spain-Germany did, you know, it really could have gone either way.
I think so. I mean, I think both... every side in these semi-finals is capable of beating the other. I just think on paper, it looks to me like England and Spain will be the favourites based on what we've seen. But, you know, Spain... They might find it hard to break down France, who've been very, very good. It's just the wide areas, I think, where Spain have a little bit extra. Yamal is just fucking incredible, isn't he? At 16 years of age, and Nico Williams on the other side. They might just have what it takes to cause the two French fullbacks some problems. Certainly, Koundé had a bit of an issue in the last game. I think he struggled a little bit against Portugal, but generally speaking, he's been good. So it's not impossible it could go the other way, but I think on paper, those are the games that I would, or those are the teams that I think will go through. Just sort of on this, as the tournament progresses, and obviously England have played extra time in 2 games, and France have played extra time.
Yeah.
Anil on Twitter, who's Anil_Nijar, he says, "Good morning, gents. Would you sit Rice, Saka and Saliba down for the first couple of games of the season and avoid having them to play at all? We know what Arteta is like with playing players. He's always playing players, isn't he, Arteta? That's his major flaw, you know. Players, making them play.
His insistence on
playing players is just, it's going to catch up with him one of these days. But I know what he means. He says, surely their long-term condition has to come into play at some point. And I guess we remember summers gone by where Arsene Wenger was very insistent on players who'd been away with their countries and played in international tournaments having some kind of a break, even if that meant that they might miss the first couple of games of the season. And the logic is, you know, it's hard to argue against. The other thing, though, is it's Declan Rice, it's Bukayo Saka and William Saliba. You're not talking about, well, should we give Cedric a bit of a holiday? It's not that. You know, these are key players.
And have you seen our fixture list? We've got some tough games.
Oh, fuck yeah, as well.
I mean, I'm looking at the calendar now. So if they get to the final, those guys, it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks until the kickoff of the Premier League.
Oh, they're playing. They're playing.
They're playing. I mean, that is the reality, isn't it?
They are playing. Yeah.
I mean, they'll get a fortnight off, probably, you would imagine.
They'll reconvene with the group, I guess, after the US tour. So there's little or no chance they're going to be. They might get them into Colney
before that, but they'll reconvene after the US tour, which will be start of August, essentially.
Yeah.
And then they've got, 2.5 weeks until the first Premier League game. I think there's a couple of friendlies in that time.
I mean, he might look at Wolves at home as one of those fixtures that, not that you take for granted, of course, but one of those where if there is a way of easing them back in and maybe giving them an extra little bit of rest, it might be that game. It might be that one. And then you're Villa away. But then he might also think about fluency and what's the word? Periodization, and maybe the best thing for them is to actually play. And
if I was putting money on it, I'd say they'll play.
I would say so, because he's always playing players. That's what he does.
He loves playing players. I mean, someone like Kai Havertz, who went out of this stage, I'd say almost certainly will play. The guys who may get to the final, maybe it changes it a little bit, and I guess they'll want to assess them and see how they are. They might be carrying little niggles or injury problems that they've had through this tournament. Bukayo Saka came into the tournament with carrying an issue. But I just find it very difficult to foresee a scenario where they don't play. I guess it might be informed as well by who else is available. Do you know what have we got in the squad? Have we made any signings by that point in time?
Any what?
It's like what you can do. You can add new players to your squad.
Right.
Yeah. You pay money.
Oh.
So you go to another club and you say, I like that player, and you pay money, and then you have the player. The player is yours, and you can use them.
It's like a human market.
Yeah, it's like a human meat market, essentially.
Okay, good. Okay. We should get involved.
We love it.
We do love it. All right. Maybe we'll talk a bit about that in part 2, will we?
Okay, yeah, now we've introduced the concept.
Yeah, that's it. People can get their heads around it while they have a cup of tea or whatever it is. And we'll come back and talk about that and more with more of your questions in part 2 right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show where we answer questions that you sent to us on Twitter at Gunnerblog and at Arseblog. Also on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. Before we get into questions, James, there are a couple of little bits that we should just highlight. A few little bits of news. Yeah. Mario Koscier-Dubry has signed for Brighton, having left Arsenal for free. At the end of his contract, he's gone to Brighton, which is probably a very good move for him, and I guess an understandable decision from him as well. When you look at the pathway to first-team football at Arsenal, and the person in your way is Bukayo Saka, you can kind of understand why somebody might decide to take their chances elsewhere.
Totally, and I think it is a really good move for him, to be honest. It's one of those that makes you go like, I knew he was a good player, because Brighton don't make many mistakes in the transfer market, or at least, they're pretty intelligent in their recruitment. But I think he turned down an Arsenal contract, didn't he? And whenever a player does that, you've got to ask yourself, well, what have they got lined up? And this makes a ton of sense for him. And I'll be fascinated to see how Brighton handle him. What age is he now? Is he 19? Mm-hmm. Will they send him out on loan? Will they integrate him in the first team squad? Curious to find out, because there's definitely talent there. And I think anyone who watched an academy game in the last 3 or 4 years could probably see, this guy's got some real talent. Will it be quite enough to make him a Champions League level player? Who knows? But I think it's a really good opportunity for him, and I'm really intrigued to see how he gets on. Any recriminations from you about that?
No, I mean, like I said, he's got Bukayo Saka ahead of him.
Yeah.
Like, what realistically can Arsenal say to a player who plays in that position if they want that player to stay? It's like, well, you're going to be a backup player. That's kind of it.
And even if Saka's got a broken leg, he's probably going to start.
Well, that's what happens. Arteta is always fucking playing players.
He loves to play players. Of all the things he plays, it's players every time.
Every single week, he's picking players to play, and that's what he does. So, no, I understand it from his perspective. If he's got ambition and if he's got drive and wants to play regular first-team football, he has made the right decision for him. And I don't really think there's anything that Arsenal can do about it, other than repurpose him in a different position. Maybe, if they really, really wanted to hold on to him, maybe they could convince him there's an opportunity in a different position. But again, that's dependent on that player wanting to play in a different position. And, players are happy to play wherever. But I think if you've got your sights set on playing as a right winger or as a right-sided forward, and you're at Arsenal and Bukayo Saka is there, I completely get why he's gone. So,
yeah. I mean, we had a question actually from Charlie Birchall on the Discord. I thought it was interesting. We said, "Morning, gents. Do you think the academy chat is being overblown?" I guess he means the sort of question about pathways and, and he says, "It feels like Chelsea are yet again ruining everything by buying every young player with a bit of talent, but this will come back to haunt them when no one can get a game. It just feels like this moment is a natural break for Arsenal, where our first team is good enough and young enough that young talent leaving will just happen. These things happen in cycles when you're a big club, and it's much harder for academy talent to stick around. And we should follow the Real Madrids of the world and just ensure sell-ons and buyback clauses are now included."
I mean, I think there is something to that the overall quality of the Arsenal first team does make it more difficult for young players to make the breakthrough. And in order to make the breakthrough, you've got to be a very, very high level player, right? In order to get that. I mean, that's just common sense and logic. But it's not that I think it's overblown, but I think people are invested in young players coming through the academy. And maybe the other side of it is like, would people be quite as exercised if we were routinely getting really good money for the players that we don't want to hang on to in the academy, right? Maybe that would soften the blow. That if, we're producing players to a level that maybe isn't quite what we need as a first team right now, but is perceived as such good quality that people are prepared to pay, a significant amount of money for these players, I think it would be easier. Because at least then your academy is generating a fair amount of profit, which could be reinvested in the academy, maybe, or even in the first team, depending on how much you get. But yeah, I just think it comes down to the quality that we have in the first team being at such a level that young players like Saka and quality like Saka is so rare. It's so rare as well, So I think it's a combination of things. But obviously, you want to produce the best quality players you can, and I also think that that isn't something we should ignore. Just because the first team is good, I think we should try and raise the level as much as possible at academy levels. So it's an interesting. It is an interesting discussion point.
I actually saw Art De Roche wrote an interesting piece about it this morning, and I was just flicking through the comments on it now. And somebody on The Athletic and somebody has commented, "Hopefully Edu and Per read this article carefully, as well as those fans, including Arseblog and Arsenal Vision, who cover their eyes and ears, pretending that it's all fine because we are winning." So there you go. Shots fired, Andrew.
Right. Well, I don't know what to say to that, actually. Other than...
No, nor do I. I don't really know what that means.
I mean, what am I supposed to do about any of it? It's nothing to do with me. The reality is when your first team is good, it's harder for young players to get into it. That's basically all I'm saying. It doesn't mean we should ignore the academy.
No, I'm with you. I think. Well, do you know what? I really think that the question from Charlie makes a good point about sell-ons and buybacks. Like, it's always frustrated me that those aren't a bigger part of deals in this country, kind of culturally. I think they are becoming more so. And Arsenal, to be fair to them, have started to do that sort of deal.
I mean, sell-ons have been there because we have had some windfalls in the past. Didn't we have like a big sell-on? I think we had a fairly substantial sell-on clause when we sold David Bentley to Blackburn. And then when Tottenham bought David Bentley, they had to give us a load of money, which was quite fun. So it's not as if we haven't done that. Could we do it better? Probably. Could we be a bit more insistent? Maybe. The buyback one, I think, is very interesting because that's not something that tends to happen in English football. Like we haven't really been involved in that kind of thing. But Manchester United, didn't they pay a load of money for Pogba, having had him on their books? He left for free and then went to Juventus, and they spent a load. And Chelsea as well with Lukaku, but he was sort of around the houses a bit before he ended up back at Chelsea, wasn't he?
Yeah. And now we're going to have to smash our transfer budget to sign Dan Bentley from Wolves when he was in our academy as a kid.
Was he?
Apparently.
Right.
I think he was, yeah. I think at a certain age he was at Arsenal. I seem to remember that do you remember him coming on against us?
Last season, was it?
Yeah, and he sort of played all right, made a few saves. I seem to remember someone after the game saying, he was at Hale End. But I think it was at quite a young age.
I can see on his Wikipedia that he spent the years 2001 to 2008 at Arsenal.
I like the sell-ons. I like the buybacks. I think we should be doing lots of that. But, these situations with like Koja Dubry and Walters, they're at the end of their contract, which is slightly different, right? They've got less control.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You mentioned Dan Bentley, and it is being reported that Arsenal have been in touch with Wolves about bringing him in. Another guy who worked with Iñaki Kenya. His jobs for the boys. He's getting a job for every goalkeeper he's ever worked with at Arsenal. But I mean, on a number of levels, it makes sense, right? Because he's sort of a backup goalkeeper. I think we probably do need, at this point, to not have a situation where there's an ongoing discussion about who the number one goalkeeper is. I think it's David Raya now. It's going to be David Raya until such time as Mikel Arteta, who loves a goalkeeper signing, something catches his eye and he spends another 30 million on a goalkeeper to compete with, in inverted commas, David Raya. But it makes sense because he's experienced enough. He is unquestionably going to be second/third choice. I saw a story yesterday that said he might be the third choice goalkeeper, but as a number two, it does make a bit of sense on the sort of widely held assumption that Aaron Ramsdale will find another club this summer, whether it's on loan or permanent.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a bad keeper. He's had a decent career and he's done all right. I might be wrong about this. This is pure instinct from me. But I think he might be seen more as the third choice than the second.
Right.
Because if you're thinking about it, like, what do you want in that third choice? You want someone who has great personality, like, is a team player. Essentially, that's a training role. It's like keeping the group motivated in training, keeping people going, being a support. It's probably not a playing role to a great extent, right? Unless something goes very wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that he fits more that profile for a club of Arsenal's size. His salary is probably quite easy to accommodate. And I think, Karl Heinz just signed a new deal. And I think part of that is you can go out on loan. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it would be as a number two. Has he worked with Raya before? That would be quite interesting to know. When did David Raya arrive?
He was at Brentford. Dan Bentley was at Brentford 2016 to 2019. And David Raya arrived at Brentford in
2019.
Right, so maybe not.
Maybe not. Yeah.
Maybe not.
So I think Iñaki would obviously be the link there.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? I agree there'll be a clear hierarchy next season, and it may be that we feel Dan Bentley is good enough to be the number two. My guess would be that we might need to sign, including Raya, 3 goalkeepers this summer. And Bentley, could be one. Although David Ornstein reported yesterday, Wolves are sort of saying, well, if you want him, you're going to have to pay for him. He's got a year left on his contract and we would need enough money to go and buy somebody as a replacement. I guess it depends how much money that is. As much as we might want 3 goalkeepers, I'm not sure we want to be spending, millions of pounds on the third one.
True. That is true. A year left on the contract of a second choice 30-year-old goalkeeper. It shouldn't be that expensive.
Shouldn't be vast, right?
Shouldn't be vast. But then who knows with some of the transfer fees and stuff we've seen throughout the summer. Who knows what people's expectations are around transfer fees that they want for players. So we'll wait and see. What about this one? Seeing as we're on the subject of transfers, I did notice that Riccardo Calafiori's social media manager and PR person Fabrizio Romano is saying that personal terms have all been agreed and Arsenal want to get the deal done pretty quickly, which, I guess if personal terms have been agreed is quite accurate. So we'll wait and see. Have you heard anything more on that one, or?
No, I have to say I haven't particularly. I'm going to do some. I had the weekend off, but I'm going to do some digging on it today. There is interest there, absolutely. I don't know that it's as far advanced as some of the reports we're reading coming out of Italy. It may be that it is, and I'm out of the loop, but I've not been able to corroborate that as yet. But let's see where I get to later today.
All right, so what about this one? It comes from Jono on Twitter, who is at Jump Punch Kick. Just reminds me of Harry Kane there for a second. He says, who do you think this German player that we're rumoured to be buying is? Charles Watts says it's definitely not Joshua Kimmich.
The German player. Now, what was this? Where does this come from?
I don't know. I've seen people talking about a mystery German player all weekend.
I think it's from the Team News and Ticks Patreon.
Right.
I have no idea. Mystery German player.
Hans Gruber.
I listen. I mean, there's some obvious ones that you'd really like, aren't there?
Musiala. Some talk of Leroy Sané. Is Leroy Sané is he available? Is he a guy you would welcome into the Arsenal squad?
Again, 28, 29 in January. That might be the thing that would make you question it. Don't know. Yeah, some talk about Kimmich. I don't see that.
But it's definitely not Kimmich. Charles Watts just said it's definitely
Charles Watts said it's not Kimmich.
It's not Kimmich, yeah.
Sorry, Charles. I've got no idea, guys. Not something I've heard. Doesn't mean it's not true. Who would you like it to be, Andrew? I'd like it to be Musiala.
I would like it to be Musiala as well. I wonder, is it a player who is at the Euros with Germany?
You'd like to think so.
Yeah. Because all the best ones are there, aren't they?
What are we doing?
Once it's not the guy, Andrick, I don't like him.
But I mean,
he's got a villain's face, James. I don't think he'd fit in this Arsenal team. The face of a villain.
Well, here's a question then.
Okay.
It's kind of about Calafiori. It's from Master Johnbury, and they say, "Good morning, gents. Do you think it's possible that a fullback will be the long-term replacement for the Jorginho role? That is, be the person primarily tasked with ball progression through passing. With Timber, White, and potentially Calafiori, we'd have several fullback options who are excellent ball progressors with strong defensive skills. This could be a way to get another attacking 8 in the team, while covering Rice's only comparative weakness, I guess ball progression, when playing at 6.
I have wondered about what sort of tactical innovation we're going to see from Mikel Arteta in the new season. I think there is going to be something. Like at the start of last season, he talked about how he wanted his team to be more unpredictable. And I think certain signings, certainly the Timber signing was going to be part of that. And then there was, there were injuries in midfield, which meant we became, if not predictable, but, we had to stick with what we had in midfield rather than being able to change it around on a game-by-game basis. So I've been wondering what that might be. And I think, the discussions we've had about left back and what kind of profile of player we might put in there has been something that's been in the back of my mind about how we might achieve that. Like, I think the Zinchenko inverting thing is kind of done. Mm-hmm. It's sort of old hat now. People know it and expect it and can live with it, whereas previously it gave us an edge in certain areas of the pitch, or it gave us a way of overloading in certain areas of the pitch, which work to our benefit. But I think everybody would expect, if you see Zinchenko now, he's going to invert, ping a long ball over the top of him, the diagonal that he finds hard to deal with in Arsenal, rather than having a sort of a strength. Have got a bit of a weakness in that position. So that's something I've been thinking about, as to whether or not a different kind of player or a different kind of profile in that position might be the way he goes. If it's Calafiori, I don't know. Is Calafiori being brought in to be the left-sided Ben White, or is he being brought in to provide strength at centre half, maybe? Is there anything going on with Gabriel? I don't know that there is. I'm just speculating here, by the way, because we know all wasn't 100% there at the start of last season. Could that be something that's raising its head again? I don't know. I'm just wondering if that might be a kind of insurance for that eventuality as well. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know either at this point in time. What I would say is that we've spoken about Arsenal needing a left back or a left-sided defender for a while now, for months. And I think that although Calafiori is ostensibly a centre-back, a bit like Sandro Martinez before him, you could see how he ticks a lot of those boxes. You know, he's a guy who can defend, but he's very, very able on the ball. He's comfortable stepping into midfield. I think one of the things that's really exciting about him and Jurrien Timber is that they can both receive the ball with their back to goal, which is pretty unusual in a defender. Like, they're both pretty happy to take the ball almost like a midfield player and turn. And I think that would open up potentially another dimension in the team, and that might be the kind of tactical evolution we see from Mikel Arteta. Like, I think it's possible that in his mind, if he was to get Calafiori, that he could play with two fullbacks like Calafiori and Timber, potentially, really stepping into that midfield area. And, as the question mentions, kind of assuming some of that playmaking responsibility from Jorginho. I don't know. I'm intrigued to find out. He's obviously had a great Euros and caught the eye of a lot of people. People who watch Serie A have been raving about him all season long and say he's fantastic. I think there was a big expectation that he was going to go to Juventus, but that interest appears to have waned a bit, and Arsenal maybe are, financially certainly in pole position to be able to step into that breach. So it's a signing I would be very interested in. We had a question from Sam on Twitter who said, and I suspect this is related, says, Kiwior, keep or sell? If reports are to be believed, Italian teams want him. How much realistically should we get for him? And if we sell, is it a wise choice?
I mean, if Calafiori comes in, it's got to mean curtains for one of Zinchenko or Kiwior.
Yeah.
And I suppose if you're drawing a parallel between two players, Calafiori and Kiwior would be most aligned, right? Left-footed central defenders who can play left back. So it would seem like the obvious replacement, like for like, in terms of what their squad profile is.
And I also think, going on the reporting at least, it feels maybe like there's more of a market for Kiwior than for Zinchenko at this point in time.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of chat, isn't there, out of Italy about wanting to bring him in, or various clubs being interested in him. And it's been going on not just for this summer, but since maybe January. There were stories in January as well. So as a player that we might actually be able to move on, I think Kiwior is the one. I quite like him. I'd be happy to keep him as well. I think he's a decent player. But if Calafiori is coming in and we need to sell a player, he looks like a sellable asset. How much should we expect for him? I mean, how much did we pay for him? 16? Was it a bit more?
I think it was a bit more than that. I think it was something like, I mean, there may have been add-ons involved, but let's have a look. In my head, I want to say like £20 million-ish.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
So I think you'd be looking for more, certainly. I think he's not a player whose reputation has taken a hit since he's come to Arsenal. I know he's been a squad player more than a first-team choice, but he had a good spell in the team last season, did well at left-back. Whenever he has played at centre-back, he's done all right. I know those have been few and far between because of Gabriel. So I think you're looking at maybe. I mean, if we paid 20, we shouldn't accept anything less than 30. Maybe would that be about right? 25, 30.
But that's quite a lot of money for a Serie A club.
It is, but like if they want the player, they're going to have to pay for him. Yeah. Like we're going to have to pay for the Wolves goalkeeper. I mean, that's the reality, that we're going to have to get fucking some money in for these players. We can't just say, well, we've spent 50 million on Calafiori, we'll take whatever we can get for Kiwior. I mean, maybe that's how it's going to work out, but that's not necessarily how it should work out. I think we should be looking to make a profit on a player who has come in, done well, and I think whose reputation, even by virtue of being part of an Arsenal team that has challenged for the Premier League title for the last 2 seasons, his reputation, his valuation has increased, and that's, what clubs are going to have to deal with. Clubs that want him are going to have to deal with that.
Yeah, he's played at World Cup, he's played at Euros.
Yeah.
He's been, an ever-present in the Poland team. Yeah, I mean, that would be great. In my head, I sort of think, I find it hard to see us getting much above 25. But then it's like, if you add together the fee we paid for him and the salary we've probably paid him over a year and a half, it's like we're barely breaking even on him. So it does seem kind of crazy, doesn't it? I think when you're selling abroad, it's so hard to turn a profit. But let's hope we can if it does go that way. My suspicion is, like you, one of Zinchenko or Kiwior will have to go if Calafiori is to come in. And my inkling is that there is more market for Kiwior at this point in time. So that's probably more likely.
All right, what about this question, which comes from Andrew Blair on Twitter, who is at @whatever. He says, are you a bit shocked by how little playing time Gabriel and Gabriel Martinelli got with Brazil in the Copa America?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Brazil seems to have had a pretty poor campaign from the little I've seen of it. Have you been following it much?
Not really. It's on too late, and I'm sort of footballed out by the Euros.
Exactly. We've got the Euros, but I'm just looking at their results now. So
I mean, they're out.
They are out. I mean, that's, very much the case. So they drew, in the group stage, they drew 0-0 with Costa Rica. They then beat Paraguay handsomely 4-1 and then drew with Colombia, which gave them a quarter-final against Uruguay in which they drew 0-0 and lost on penalties. Yeah. So they won 1 of their 4 games. I did notice, that Gabriel hadn't got the nod to play at centre-back. I think it was a toss-up between him and Eder Militao to partner Marquinhos, and Eder Militao got the nod. And Martinelli has had a pretty good sort of run as a kind of super sub for Brazil. He had been quite involved. He scored in one of their warm-up friendlies. But from the bits and pieces I've seen, he's barely got on.
Yeah, hasn't had much. He did score a penalty in their shootout the other night, to be fair. Yeah, he scored one of the Brazil penalties who scored, yeah.
Yeah, but he's not had a great... I mean, listen, it's hard, right? He is in direct competition with Vinicius Jr. in that squad. So his role was always likely to be as a substitute. But he does have the capacity to come on for him or Rafinha or Rodrigo. So I thought he'd maybe get a few more minutes than he has. I'm surprised that Gabriel didn't get the nod. But, they haven't had a great tournament. So maybe they'll be...
Yeah, I'm not sure. Is Vinicius Jr. actually at the tournament? I'm not sure.
A good question. I think he is.
Is he?
I think he is, yeah.
Right. Well, South American football experts can put us in our place.
For our terrible analysis.
Yes.
I mean, listen, they're out. I suppose that's the good news from an Arsenal perspective.
Yeah. They're out, so they get some holidays, and they could well be back and involved for the US tour, perhaps. They might get a couple of weeks off.
I mean, it does make a genuine difference. The final of the Copa America is the day after the Euros final. So, yeah, perhaps they could be back for the tour. Yeah, that would give them 2 weeks off. So they've got an outside chance.
Vinicius Jr. is at the tournament, so I'm an idiot.
No, that's all right. Don't worry.
Okay.
What about this? Speaking of Brazilians, Pablo Eagle on Twitter says, do you read anything into the absence of Gabriel Jesus from the pre-season in Marbella? There was all this talk about potential knee surgery this off-season, but it seems to have gone quiet on that front.
Not really. I did read that there were some players who were going to join up a little bit later.
Right.
With the guys out in Marbella. So I think Martin Odegaard was one of the players who came a little bit late, and he's certainly been involved. He did an interview, I think, with CBS or something. I saw it doing the rounds.
Yeah. Ben White's out there.
Ben White, yeah. Jurriën Timber. So I think I read that Gabriel Jesus was going to be joining up with those players. I don't know if he has. It's not like Arsenal are posting a lot of updates about what's going on in Marbella, who's there, who's not, who's doing this, who's doing that.
Yeah, I think it's fairly, I don't think they're sort of flagging it as the return to training. It's it is very much a pre-season camp. And Arsenal's players have been out to Marbella a few times over the past couple of years. I think a number of them even went in the spring for a few days during one of the international breaks to this training camp. So it's become kind of part of the system that they go out there. And I think to be honest, I think they're having a great time because beautiful weather, great facilities. I think it's quite enjoyable, a bit like Dubai or some of the other camps they've had. As for Gabriel Jesus, I've not heard anything about surgery. And to be fair, surgery was only ever really talked about as a possibility rather than something that was definitely going to happen. Yeah,
he mentioned it, didn't he? It wasn't a case that it was sort of reporting. I think it was something that he mentioned himself. He
said it in an interview.
Yeah, because he pulled out of or didn't make himself available for the Copa America squad.
But I think it was more in the context of like, who knows? Maybe I'll have surgery kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think if they can avoid another surgery for him, another procedure, another rehabilitation, then I think
that's the right thing. That is the right thing to do.
So I think that's the intention, is to try and strengthen the knee and do all the requisite work around it to avoid having to intervene surgically, because that has a different timeline.
Well, we'll find out, obviously, when a bit more is known about what's going on in pre-season training, and maybe the return to London Colney and photographers and things like that. They might do some training pics and we'll see who's there and who's not, etc., etc. What about this one from the Discord? It comes from Dampen, and he says, I was at a wedding this weekend with Tim Lewis in attendance. Wow. He watched the England game and danced to a Lady Gaga medley. My question is, can you see Arteta playing Saliba as left centre-back with one of Ben White or Timber rotating the right centre-back role? Because Saliba obviously has played on the left for France.
Quite a big pivot there.
It is.
But what an image. Tim Lewis going wild.
To poker face.
Poker face. Maybe he's got his poker face on for the transfer window. Hopefully so. Yes, I can. I mean, the thing is, I think talking about Arsenal's defence like a back four, without wishing to go all hipster on you guys, is probably a bit outmoded, because in possession, it's so often a three, right? And I think what we saw last season was kind of an evolution to seeing Saliba more and more and more kind of as the centre of that and the kind of pivotal playmaker. And I think that's probably quite likely to continue, but there are ways you could continue that while ostensibly having him as kind of the left-sided centre-back when you move into a four. And I can see that kind of evolution happening. If Jurriën Timber plays more games as a kind of right-back, I think Ben White is going to be in contention for those more central spots. I know Gabriel and Saliba were a really fantastic pairing last season, but I think if you've got Ben White, if you've got Calafiori potentially, if you've got Timber as well, I think then we might see a bit more chopping and changing and a bit more flexibility in the defensive selection. What do you think?
Do you have a question mark over Gabriel in your head?
I do deep down,
Yeah.
I do deep down. Partly because of what happened last summer and the sort of strange hokey-cokey that took place. And partly because Arsenal have been looking for the last sort of 2 or 3 years at some quite high-level centre-backs who can play left-sided centre-half. Like, you know, there's a guy at Dortmund now, Schlotterbeck, who Arsenal have watched quite closely. And Mark Guéhi of Crystal Palace, Arsenal have watched quite closely.
Very closely.
Yeah, and now Calafiori being, you know, of interest. There is a nagging part of me that makes me think. Do you know what? As well, I'm probably putting too much on this. But 2 years ago, I was in America with Arsenal, and we did a kind of roundtable interview with Edu. And Edu, this was a pure example, right? A bit like Gabriel Jesus talked about surgery. He kind of plucked it from nowhere, but he was talking about how we need to sell better. And I think Gabriel had recently signed his contract at that time. And he kind of said, you know, and now if someone wants to buy one of our players, they're all under contract. And I'm paraphrasing, but he said something like, and if someone wants to come and buy, say, Gabriel, they've got to pay big money. And I remember thinking, like, it was purely just a name, you know, it could have been anybody.
Yeah.
But ever since then, in the back of my mind, it's kind of, you know, it's been there. And I do wonder if the club, you know, we spoke about Kiwior. You want to sell Kiwior now, but how much can you really make? I do wonder if within the club, they look at Gabriel as someone, it's like, well, we could turn a proper profit on that guy.
Yeah.
Like, we paid 20 something million for him.
Yeah.
He's easily worth double that now, you know, easily. And if we are in a position where we don't know the ins and outs of the finances, but where we want or need to actually make some money on someone, he is one of the players who that would apply to.
Yeah.
All that said, I think he's brilliant and I wouldn't sell him. But there is just something over the past 2 or 3 years that's made me think, is there a doubt somewhere? You know, like, does Mikel have like an inch of doubt?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I love him. I think he's brilliant. His partnership with Saliba is amazing. But I too just have this, I don't know what it is, a nagging feeling that he could be a player that we decide to sell for all the reasons.
And also a player who, you know, again, we don't know everything about the situation last summer, but you'd have to imagine it was to do with Saudi interest. And I think at that point in time, at least, perhaps he was open to that, you know? And
yeah, maybe. I don't know.
So who knows? You know, if the right opportunity came up for him, maybe he would also be interested in going. I think too there might be a situation coming on the horizon with Gabriel where it's time almost for another contract to be discussed.
I'm sure I saw it reported somewhere that there were some discussions going on, and whether or not those discussions have been productive or not, I really don't know. But yeah, maybe that will play a part in what happens. That if Arsenal are offering an extension or offering a new deal, and maybe not signing a new deal makes it easier to make a move at some point. Again, I'm not saying that's what he wants. I just think that there's stuff going on in the background maybe with Gabriel that we're not quite aware of. So.
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't think it's a huge leap of the imagination to say that Gabriel might come into those contract negotiations saying, well, I think I should be paid what William Saliba gets paid. You know, we are an equal partnership. I play as many minutes as him. I'm a Brazil international. You know, I should be on that kind of money. And I don't find it ludicrous to imagine that Arsenal might go, well, if that's what it's going to cost us, we might have a think about that. Mm-hmm. This is speculation, but I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's a really fascinating one, Gabriel. Whatever happened at the start of last season, I've never felt fully sort of reassured after that he's properly here for the long term. But
yeah, I mean, he plays all the time. He plays all the games, you know.
But that's what Mikel does. He plays players, Andrew.
Playing players. It's too much at times.
At the end of the day, Gabriel's a player. And so as long as he's a player, there's a chance that Mikel's going to play him.
Yeah. He just continues to play players in positions. That's the other thing. He plays them in positions. He plays these players in positions. And
the nerve of the guy.
I know. Have you got one more?
I've got a game.
You've got a game? Yeah, sure.
It's from Ringo Casey on the Discord. It's a new game.
Right. Let's do it.
I have a game for ye, says Ringo. You must guess higher or lower.
Is he a pirate? I have a game for ye.
I have a game.
Should you lose the game, you forfeit the treasure.
You must guess higher or lower for each player in comparison to the last for number of appearances.
Oh,
so it's kind of like Brucey's Price is Right, but with Arsenal appearances.
Okay.
So we start with Gabriel Martinelli, 174 appearances.
Has he made that many?
I want to know, Andrew, higher or lower, Andre Arshavin?
Lower.
He's gone lower. He's right, it's lower, 144.
Woo, okay.
Okay, 144, Andre Arshavin. Next up, higher or lower, Lucas Podolski.
Higher.
Higher? I'm not so sure. Let's see.
Maybe not.
Lower, 82.
Hang on. Lucas Podolski only made 82 Arsenal appearances.
Maybe these are Premier League appearances?
Could be.
Should we try and validate that?
No, let's just play the game. Who do you?
Lower, okay. Well, I'm still in. I thought it was lower. Jeremy Aliadier from 82.
Lower.
Lower, 50.
Right.
Your friend of mine next up, Andrew, Andre Santos.
Lower,
really? It's close, that, I think. It's lower. It's 33.
Yes.
Okay. Here we go. Marouane Chamakh. So from 33, Andre Santos.
Higher,
I think, yeah. 67.
Yeah.
More than double.
The shamster.
Okay, we're going back away now. Anders Limpar.
Higher.
Very confident. Yeah, 106. What about this? Niall Quinn.
Oh.
I don't know. That's too early for me to know.
So 106. I'm going to say lower.
Really? Okay. It is 76. Good guessing, Andrew. I'm looking for Pascal Segan now from 76.
Higher.
No, really?
Yeah.
98.
Yes.
You're right.
Come on. I like this game.
Centurion. Okay. 98 Pascal Segan. Where are we headed next? We're headed to the very lovable Danny Welbeck.
Ooh, that's tough, actually.
Yeah.
I'm going to say lower.
Remember, he was constantly injured.
That was part of my thinking, yes.
Well, Andrew, we were wrong. Danny Welbeck was higher, 126.
Wow.
He was around a while, wasn't he?
He
like
was. That was it.
years.
But I remember a couple of really big injuries. Yeah. So I figured that would have had a significant impact.
So we're up at 126 now, and we're looking for Jose Antonio Reyes.
Ooh.
I think lower.
Lower? I think lower.
Oh, lower, but not by much. 110. Oof. Squeaked in.
Got that one just about right.
Now, from 110 Reyes, Reece Nelson.
Lower.
89. Oh, it's getting closer now. From 89, I want the manager himself, Mikel Arteta. Higher. Yes, 150. Okay, we're on the home straight. I think we've got 5 left.
Okay.
So we're at 150 with Mikel Arteta. Alexis Sanchez.
Higher.
He played a lot of games. Yes, just higher, Andrew. We did it. 166.
There we go.
Mark Overmars.
He
wasn't there that long, was he?
No, I mean...
4 years.
Well,
was it?
97, 98 to what?
2000?
2001, yeah, it was 2000. So I'm going to say lower. Then what? What are we looking at?
166 for Sanchez.
Lower.
It is lower. 141.
There we go.
This one's tough. We're on the last three now. Jens Lehmann.
Higher.
Higher. It is higher. 200.
Of course.
Wow, that's a nice round number.
It is, isn't it?
And I'm guessing these are his second spell at the club.
Yeah, I'm guessing these are like the Wikipedia numbers, are they?
Yeah. Which is never wrong, as we discussed.
Well,
two more. We're on 200 for Jens Lehmann. I want to know how many games for Kieran Gibbs. Oh, he was there a long time, but he also was injured quite a lot.
He was also injured, and he wasn't always first choice. So it was Gael Clichy, and I'm going to say just lower.
I think so too. It's wrong. It's higher, Andrew.
Oh, Kieran Gibbs, who I share a birthday with.
229.
My fellow September guy, Kieran Gibbs. I apologise, Kieran Gibbs. 229.
And final one. We're at 229, Kieran Gibbs. Thomas Rosicky.
Ooh, there's another really difficult one, isn't it? Thomas Rosicky.
He's picked some tricky players because he's picked some players who've had big injury histories, but also been great servants.
I'm going to say 226 is Kieran Gibbs.
229.
229. I'm going to say higher.
Same. I'm going to say higher. Maybe we're crazy. It's higher, Andrew.
Get in. Finish with a flourish.
On today's list, 246.
246. Wow.
And thanks for that, Ringo. They said they had to end on a personal favourite player and person. Which is fair enough.
Who doesn't love Thomas Rosicky? What was it Arsene Wenger said? If you love football, you love Thomas Rosicky.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I hope you all played along at home. Maybe you did better than us. I don't know.
Yeah, we did all right, I think.
Yeah, there were some surprising ones in there. I mean, Danny Welbeck having 126. That was probably a bit higher than I thought.
The Podolski one was much lower than I thought, actually.
Who was lower?
Podolski, I think.
Yeah, he was 82. Seagan, 98. That's a lot of games.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, I mean, he was basically the guy after Touré and Campbell. You know, he was there a long time. So
a
good long time. So
there you go.
There we go. All right. Well, look, thank you. Thank you for that game. And thank you to all of you guys for being here and for listening. Hope you enjoyed the show. As always, great to have you along. Thank you also to Rocky for his little contributions in the background there. Getting in on the podcast act at a young age. That's it. You get your feet. You know, it's like playing a sport young. It just becomes second nature then. So
absolutely.
So we will have more Euro 2024 podcasts for you during the week over on Patreon, patreon.com/Arseblog. Back later in the week with a regular Arsecast. For now, though, take it easy, folks, and we will catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.